The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Chin Technologies Plaza as Marcus Rivera adjusted his security badge and began his evening rounds. The glass towers reflected the golden light, creating patterns that danced across the polished marble walkways where the last of the office workers hurried toward the parking garage. Marcus checked his watch and felt the familiar tug in his chest. In 2 hours, he would need to pick up Diego from the after-school program, and his 80-year-old son would be waiting with that bright smile that made every long day worth it. Marcus had been working security at the tech campus for 18 months now, ever since the insurance settlement from Elena's accident had finally run out. The job paid enough to cover their small apartment and Diego's needs, with health benefits that had become precious after watching medical bills destroy families in his old neighborhood. It wasn't the career he had planned when he'd earned his MBA in cybersecurity, but life had taught him that plans were fragile things, easily shattered by a drunk driver on a rainy Thursday evening. The plaza was quieting now, the usual rush of professionals heading home, leaving behind the peaceful hum of fountains and the distant sound of traffic. Marcus appreciated these moments of calm before the building maintenance crews arrived and the cleaning staff began their nightly routines. It gave him time to think, to remember Elena's laugh and the way she used to tease him about being too serious. She would have loved seeing Diego start 3rd grade this year, would have been there for his first soccer game last weekend instead of Marcus juggling work schedules to make it to the sidelines. A small figure near the central fountain caught his attention, a little girl in an expensive-looking navy dress and polished shoes, sitting alone on the marble edge with her legs swinging. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with silky black hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and the kind of composed posture that spoke of careful upbringing. Marcus frowned and scanned the area for any adults who might belong with her, but the plaza had emptied except for a few scattered individuals heading to their cars. The girl was humming softly to herself, trailing her fingers in the fountain water despite the obvious quality of her outfit. Something about her solitary presence stirred the protective instincts that had been honed first in the military and later sharpened by fatherhood. Marcus had learned to trust those instincts, whether facing down insurgents in Afghanistan or navigating the challenges of raising Diego alone. Children didn't sit by themselves in corporate plazas at 6 o'clock in the evening unless something was wrong. He approached slowly, his combat boots silent on the marble, as years of tactical training kept his movements non-threatening. The last thing he wanted was to frighten her, but every second she remained alone increased the potential for danger. The plaza might seem secure, but Marcus knew that predators often targeted exactly these kinds of upscale environments where people assumed safety and let their guard down. The girl looked up as a shadow fell across the fountain, and Marcus was struck by her dark eyes, intelligent and curious rather than afraid. There was something familiar about her features, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. She smiled at him with the innocent trust that broke his heart and reminded him how vulnerable children were in a world that didn't always protect them. "Good evening, little miss," Marcus said gently, crouching down to bring himself to her eye level. "Are you waiting for someone?" His voice carried the warm authority that came naturally when speaking to children, the same tone he used with Diego when explaining why homework came before video games. The girl tilted her head and studied his security uniform with the kind of careful attention that suggested she had been taught to notice details. "My mommy is still working," she said matter-of-factly. "Miss Patricia took me to the bathroom, but I wanted to see the fountain. The water makes pretty sounds." Marcus felt his protective instincts sharpen further. A nanny or caregiver had lost track of this child, which meant she was essentially alone in a public space during the transition period when day shift ended and evening security took over. These were exactly the kind of gaps that dangerous people looked for, the moments when responsibility shifted and attention wavered. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, settling into a more comfortable crouch that would allow him to react quickly if needed, while maintaining the gentle demeanor that kept children calm. "Sophia," she replied, then added with obvious pride, "Sophia Chun. My mommy runs the big building with all the computers." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Chin Technologies. Catherine Chun, the CEO whose name appeared on his paychecks, and whose reputation for brilliant leadership was matched only by her legendary work ethic. This child was the daughter of one of the most powerful women in the tech industry, sitting alone and unprotected while her mother worked late in the tower above them. Marcus glanced up at the gleaming facade of the main building, wondering which of those lit windows contained the woman who had built an empire but might not know her daughter was outside and vulnerable. The irony wasn't lost on him that he spent his days protecting her company's assets while her most precious asset sat unguarded beside a fountain. "Well, Miss Sophia Chun," Marcus said with a smile that held genuine warmth despite his growing concern, "I think we should find Miss Patricia and make sure your mommy knows where you are. What do you say we take a little walk and look for her?" Sophia considered this proposal with the seriousness of someone much older, then nodded and slipped off the fountain edge. As she stood, Marcus noticed a man in a dark jacket who had been lingering near the parking structure in trance suddenly straighten and begin walking in their direction. Something about the man's posture and purposeful stride sent warning signals through Marcus's trained instincts, the same internal alarm system that had kept him alive through 3 tours overseas. The man's face was partially obscured by the evening shadows, but Marcus could see enough to note the tension in his jaw and the way his hands hung loose at his sides, ready for action. This wasn't a casual passerby or a late-departing office worker. This was someone with an agenda, and every instinct Marcus had developed in combat and security work told him that agenda involved the little girl now standing trustingly beside him. Marcus kept his expression calm as he gently placed his hand on Sophia's shoulder, guiding her slightly behind him while maintaining the appearance of a casual conversation. His years of military training had taught him to assess threats without telegraphing his awareness, and right now, every instinct screamed that the approaching man represented danger. The stranger's gait was too purposeful, his focus too intense, and his timing too convenient to be coincidental. "Let's head toward the main entrance, sweetheart," Marcus said to Sophia, his voice carrying the same gentle warmth while his eyes tracked the man's approach. "I bet Miss Patricia is looking for you right about now, and we don't want her to worry." Sophia nodded agreeably and began walking beside him, her small hand unconsciously reaching for his, as children often did when they sensed adult tension, even if they couldn't identify its source. Marcus allowed the contact, knowing that maintaining her trust and cooperation might be crucial in the next few minutes. His radio was clipped to his belt, and he calculated the distance to the nearest security station while keeping the approaching figure in his peripheral vision. The man was closing the gap between them with deliberate steps, no longer making any pretense of casual movement. Marcus could see him more clearly now in the plaza's evening lighting. Mid-30s, athletic build, wearing dark jeans and a black windbreaker that could easily conceal weapons. His face carried the hard expression of someone who had moved beyond rational thought into the dangerous territory of focused intent. Marcus recognized the look from his tours overseas, the expression of men who had convinced themselves that violence was not only justified but necessary. It was the face of someone who had nursed grievances until they festered into action, and Marcus felt his protective instincts shift into the heightened awareness that had kept him alive in combat zones. "Excuse me," the man called out, his voice carrying an edge that made Marcus's muscles tense. "You need to step away from the girl." The words confirmed Marcus's worst fears. This wasn't a random encounter or a case of mistaken identity. The man knew exactly who Sophia was, and he had come here specifically for her. Marcus felt the familiar calm that descended over him in crisis situations, the mental state where training took over and time seemed to slow down enough to make critical decisions. "I'm sorry, but I don't know you," Marcus replied evenly, continuing to guide Sophia toward the building entrance while keeping his body between her and the stranger. "This little girl is waiting for her caregiver, and I'm just helping her find her way back safely." The man's expression darkened, and Marcus caught the telltale bulge under the left side of his windbreaker that suggested a concealed weapon. Years of tactical training allowed him to catalog details automatically while maintaining his protective positioning. right-handed based on his stance, probably carrying in a shoulder holster, confident enough to approach in the open, which suggested either desperation or careful planning. "You don't understand," the man said, his voice rising with frustration. "I know who she is. Catherine Chun destroyed my life, cost me everything I work for, and now it's time for her to understand what loss feels like. That little girl is coming with me." Sophia pressed closer to Marcus, her child's intuition finally catching up with the adult tension surrounding her. Marcus felt her small body trembling against his leg and knew that whatever happened next, his primary objective was getting her to safety. The man's words revealed this was personal, a revenge scenario against the CEO using her daughter as leverage. Marcus had seen similar situations in war zones, where grievance and desperation combined to create dangerous individuals who believed their pain justified any action. The key was staying calm, buying time, and looking for opportunities to protect the innocent while neutralizing the threat. "Sir, I understand you're upset," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to defusing volatile situations. "But whatever issue you have with Ms. Chun, this isn't the way to resolve it. This little girl has nothing to do with your problems." The man laughed bitterly, a sound that carried years of accumulated resentment. "Nothing to do with it? She's got everything to do with it. Catherine Chun sits in her tower, making decisions that destroy people's lives without ever thinking about the consequences. She fired me, blacklisted me, made it impossible for me to find work in this industry, all because I questioned one of her precious projects." Marcus continued moving slowly toward the building, calculating distances and options. His radio was within reach, security cameras were recording everything, and the main entrance was less than 50 yards away. But the man was closing the distance, and Marcus could see the moment of decision approaching in his eyes. "My name is Vincent Torres," the man continued, his voice growing more agitated. "I gave 12 years of my life to that company, and she threw me away like garbage because I dared to suggest her new security protocol had vulnerabilities. She destroyed my career, my reputation, everything I built, and now she's going to know what it feels like to lose something precious." The confession gave Marcus crucial information. Vincent Torres was a former employee with technical knowledge of the company, which explained how he had gained access to the plaza and known Sophia's routine. This wasn't a random kidnapping attempt, but a calculated revenge plot, which made him both more dangerous and potentially more predictable. "Mr. Torres," Marcus said, subtly shifting his stance to better shield Sophia while preparing for the physical confrontation that now seemed inevitable. "I can see you've been hurt, and maybe you deserve better treatment than you received. But taking this little girl won't fix what happened to you. It'll only create more pain for everyone involved, including yourself." Vincent's expression hardened further, and Marcus saw his hand move toward his jacket. Time was running out for peaceful resolution, and Marcus felt the familiar mental shift that occurred when diplomacy gave way to tactical necessity. His military training had taught him to recognize the moment when talking ended and action began, and that moment was approaching rapidly. "You don't get to lecture me about pain," Vincent snarled. "You're just some rent-a-cop who doesn't understand what it's like to have your life destroyed by people who think they're untouchable. Catherine Chun is going to learn that her money and power can't protect what matters most to her." Marcus felt Sophia's grip tighten on his hand, and he squeezed gently in return, trying to convey reassurance while preparing for what came next. Every second of delay increased the chances that other security personnel would arrive or that Vincent would escalate beyond words. But Marcus also knew that sudden movements could trigger violence before he was ready to control it. The plaza's evening quiet was broken only by the fountain's gentle splash and the distant hum of traffic, creating an almost surreal backdrop for the confrontation unfolding. Marcus was acutely aware of Sophia's breathing, Vincent's approaching footsteps, and the weight of responsibility that came with standing between a child and someone determined to harm her. His radio crackled softly with routine security chatter, and Vincent's eyes flicked toward the sound with obvious alarm. The moment of recognition that help might be coming pushed him past the threshold of patience, and Marcus saw his hand disappear inside his jacket. The moment Vincent's hand emerged from his jacket clutching a black pistol, time seemed to crystallize for Marcus into the hyper-focused clarity that had kept him alive through countless dangerous encounters. His military training kicked in automatically, cataloging angles, distances, and possibilities in the split second before conscious thought could interfere with survival instinct. Sophia was directly behind him. Vincent was 8 feet away with a clear line of fire, and the nearest cover was the fountain's marble base 15 feet to their left. "Get down, sweetheart," Marcus said quietly to Sophia, his voice carrying the calm authority that children instinctively obeyed in crisis situations. He felt her immediately drop to a crouch behind him, her small hands gripping the fabric of his security uniform as she sought the protection of his larger frame. Vincent raised the weapon with the jerky movements of someone operating on adrenaline rather than training, his grip uncertain and his stance awkward in a way that suggested familiarity with firearms, but not proficiency. Marcus had seen the difference countless times in combat zones, the distinction between those who owned guns and those who truly knew how to use them under pressure. It was a small advantage, but in situations like this, small advantages could mean the difference between life and death. "You think you can stop me?" Vincent shouted, his voice cracking with the strain of emotions too long suppressed. "I've got nothing left to lose, and Catherine Shun is going to pay for what she did to my family. That little girl is coming with me, and if you don't step aside, I'll go through you to get her." Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms visible, while positioning his body to provide maximum coverage for Sophia. His radio was clipped to his belt, but reaching for it would likely trigger Vincent's already unstable finger on the trigger. Instead, Marcus relied on the security cameras he knew were recording everything and the protocol that would have other guards responding to any disturbance in this area. "Mr. Torres, you're making a mistake that will destroy any chance you have of getting your life back," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the weapon pointed at his chest. "Take a moment to think about what you're really doing here. This isn't justice, and it's not going to fix what happened to you." Vincent's laugh was harsh and bitter, the sound of someone who had moved beyond rational thought into the dangerous territory of absolute desperation. "Justice? There's no justice for people like me when we go up against people like her. The courts won't touch her, the media protects her, and meanwhile, my wife left me because I couldn't find work, and my kids think their father is a failure." Marcus felt Sophia trembling against his legs and knew that prolonging this confrontation increased the trauma she would carry regardless of how it ended. But he also recognized that Vincent was still talking, which meant he was still conflicted about crossing the final line from threats to violence. Every second of conversation was a second that might allow security backup to arrive or create an opportunity to disarm him without bloodshed. "Your children need their father to come home tonight," Marcus said, drawing on his experience talking down agitated soldiers who had reached their breaking point. "They need him to be a man who found a better way to solve his problems, not someone who hurt an innocent child because he was in pain." "Don't tell me about my children," Vincent snarled, but Marcus could see uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "You don't know what it's like to watch everything you work for disappear because some corporate executive decided you were expendable. You don't know what it's like to see your kids lose respect for you because you can't provide for them anymore." Marcus felt a surge of recognition at Vincent's words, remembering his own struggle after Elena's death when the insurance money ran out and he had to swallow his pride to take the security job. The difference was that he had chosen to protect rather than harm, to build rather than destroy, but he understood the desperation that drove men to desperate actions. "You're right. I don't know your exact situation," Marcus said, allowing genuine empathy to color his voice while keeping his body positioned between Vincent and Sophia. "But I know what it's like to lose everything that matters and have to start over. I know what it's like to worry about providing for your children and wonder if you're failing them." Vincent's grip on the weapon wavered slightly, but his eyes remained fixed on Sophia with an intensity that made Marcus's protective instincts flare. The little girl had gone completely still behind him, trusting in his ability to keep her safe in a way that both humbled and terrified him. She reminded him so much of Diego at that age, when the world seemed full of adults who could fix any problem and make any hurt go away. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the parking structure, and Vincent's head snapped toward the noise with obvious alarm. His finger tightened on the trigger as panic began to override whatever restraint he had been maintaining, and Marcus saw the exact moment when talking time ended and action became necessary. In one fluid movement born of countless hours of tactical training, Marcus lunged forward and to the left, driving his shoulder toward Vincent's gun hand while wrapping his arms around Sophia to carry her away from the line of fire. The distance closed in a heartbeat, but Vincent's reflexes were fast enough to squeeze the trigger as Marcus's body impacted his weapon arm. The gunshot cracked across the plaza like thunder, echoing off the glass towers and marble surfaces in a way that seemed to go on forever. Marcus felt the bullet's passage like a line of fire across his right shoulder, the impact spinning him slightly, but not stopping his forward momentum. His tackle carried both men to the ground with Vincent underneath, the pistol skittering across the marble surface beyond either man's reach. Sophia screamed, a sound of pure terror that cut through Marcus like a blade. But he could hear her voice, which meant she was conscious and likely uninjured. His right arm felt weak and warm with spreading blood, but his left was still functional, and his weight advantage kept Vincent pinned beneath him as they struggled on the cold marble. Vincent fought with the desperation of someone who knew capture meant prison, clawing at Marcus's face and trying to knee him in the ribs. But Marcus had trained for close combat against opponents who wanted to kill him, not desperate civilians driven by grief and rage. He used his greater size and experience to control Vincent's movements while applying pressure to the carotid arteries that would render him unconscious without permanent harm. "Stay back, sweetheart," Marcus called to Sophia through gritted teeth as he maintained his hold on Vincent. "Everything's going to be okay. Help is coming, and you're safe now." The last thing Marcus saw before Vincent went limp was Sophia's tear-streaked face staring at him with a mixture of fear and awe, her dark eyes reflecting the plaza lights as she stood frozen by the fountain where this had all began. The seconds following Vincent's collapse stretched like hours as Marcus fought through the burning pain in his shoulder to secure the scene. His military medic training kicked in automatically, assessing his own wound as superficial but requiring attention while ensuring the immediate threat was neutralized. Vincent lay unconscious but breathing, his pulse steady under Marcus's fingers as years of battlefield medicine guided his actions, even while his own blood seeped through his uniform. Sophia remained frozen by the fountain, her small frame shaking with delayed shock as the reality of what had just happened began to penetrate her 6-year-old understanding. Marcus knew he needed to reach her quickly, to provide the reassurance and stability that children desperately needed in the aftermath of trauma, but first he had to ensure Vincent wouldn't wake up with access to any additional weapons. With his good left arm, Marcus quickly patted down Vincent's unconscious form, finding a backup knife clipped inside his belt and a set of zip ties that made Marcus's blood run cold as he realized how thoroughly Vincent had planned this abduction. The implications of what might have happened if he hadn't been there, if Sophia had been alone by the fountain when Vincent made his move, sent a wave of protective fury through Marcus that he had to consciously suppress to focus on immediate needs. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus called softly to Sophia as he struggled to his feet, his right arm hanging uselessly while his left maintained pressure on the shoulder wound. "The bad man can't hurt you now. You're safe, and help is coming very soon." Sophia's dark eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and fascination as she stared at him, taking in the blood on his uniform and the way he favored his injured side. Marcus had seen that expression before on Diego's face during the worst nights after Elena's death, when his son had looked to him for reassurance that the world still made sense and that someone strong was still there to protect him. "Are you hurt very bad?" Sophia whispered, her voice so small that Marcus had to strain to hear her over the plaza's fountain. "There's red on your shirt, and you look like you're in pain." Marcus managed a reassuring smile despite the throbbing in his shoulder and the way his security radio was crackling with urgent chatter as other guards responded to reports of gunfire. His training told him to stay put and wait for backup, but his paternal instincts demanded he get closer to Sophia to provide the physical comfort that frightened children needed. "I'm going to be just fine," he told her, moving slowly so as not to startle her with sudden movements. "I've had much worse scratches than this, and the doctors are going to fix me up good as new. But what I really need to know is, are you hurt anywhere? Did the bad man hurt you before I got there?" Sophia shook her head solemnly, then surprised Marcus by taking several tentative steps in his direction. He had expected her to be afraid of him too, given that she had just witnessed him in violent confrontation, but instead she seemed drawn to his presence with the instinct children had for recognizing true protectors versus those who would harm them. The sound of sirens was growing louder now, echoing off the glass towers as police and paramedics responded to what the security system would have flagged as an active shooter situation. Marcus knew the next few minutes would involve a lot of questions and explanations, but first he needed to make sure Sophia was emotionally stable enough to handle the chaos of official response. "Miss Patricia is probably looking for you right now," Marcus said, settling carefully onto the marble edge of the fountain so he could be closer to her eye level without towering over her frightened form. "And I bet your mommy is going to want to see you very soon to make sure you're okay." At the mention of her mother, Sophia's composure finally cracked, and tears began streaming down her cheeks as the full weight of her fear and confusion overwhelmed her carefully maintained composure. "She's going to be so scared when she finds out what happened," Sophia sobbed. "She's always telling me to stay close to Miss Patricia and not to wander off by myself." Marcus felt his heart break a little at the self-blame he could hear creeping in her voice, the way traumatized children often convince themselves that somehow they were responsible for the terrible things that happen around them. He had seen it in young soldiers after their first firefights and in Diego during the darkest months after losing his mother. "Listen to me very carefully, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice carrying the gentle firmness that he used with Diego when delivering important life lessons. "None of this is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong by looking at the pretty fountain, and you couldn't have known that bad man was planning to hurt you. Sometimes grown-ups make terrible choices, but that's never because of anything children do." The first police car rounded the corner of the plaza with lights flashing, followed immediately by an ambulance and additional security vehicles. Marcus could see officers emerging with weapons drawn, following protocol for an active shooter response. And he knew the next few minutes are going to be intense and potentially frightening for Sophia. "Sophia, I need you to do something very important for me," Marcus said, managing to crouch down despite the pain in his shoulder so he could look directly into her eyes. "In just a minute, a lot of people are going to come over here to help us. Police officers, paramedics, maybe some other security guards like me. They're all good people who want to make sure we're safe, but it might seem scary because there will be a lot of them and they'll be asking lots of questions." Sophia nodded solemnly, wiping her tears with the back of her small hand as she tried to compose herself with the resilience that children often showed in crisis situations. "Will you stay with me?" she asked in a voice that nearly broke Marcus's heart with its vulnerability. "I'll stay as close as they'll let me," Marcus promised, knowing that protocol would likely separate them once the paramedics began treatment, but unwilling to add to her fear by explaining the complexities of emergency response procedures. "And remember, your mommy is going to be here very soon, and she's going to be so proud of how brave you were." The police officers were approaching cautiously, their training evident in the way they secure the perimeter and assess the scene before focusing on the unconscious Vincent and the wounded Marcus. Marcus slowly raised his good hand to show he wasn't a threat, calling out his identification as building security and his status as the victim who had neutralized the attacker. Detective Raymond Brooks, a seasoned officer with kind eyes and graying hair, took charge of the scene with the competent efficiency that came from years of handling traumatic situations involving children. He approached Sophia with the gentle demeanor that experienced cops develop for dealing with young witnesses, his voice soft and reassuring as he introduced himself. "Hello there, young lady," Detective Brooks said, kneeling down to Sophia's level much as Marcus had done. "My name is Ray, and I'm a police officer. I understand you've had a very scary day, but I want you to know that you're completely safe now. And this brave man here made sure that the person who wanted to hurt you can't bother you anymore." Sophia looked between Marcus and Detective Brooks, her tear-streaked face showing the confusion and exhaustion that followed traumatic experiences. The paramedics were approaching with their equipment, and Marcus could see Catherine Chen's distinctive figure emerging from the building entrance, her professional composure cracking as she spotted her daughter among the emergency responders. Catherine Chen moved through the crowd of emergency responders with a focused determination that had built her technology empire, her heels clicking against the marble plaza as she navigated between police officers and paramedics. Her normally immaculate business suit was wrinkled from running down 37 flights of stairs when the elevators locked down during the security alert, and her perfectly styled hair showed signs of the panic that had consumed her from the moment her assistant burst into the boardroom with news of an incident involving her daughter. The executive who commanded rooms full of powerful men and made decisions affecting thousands of employees felt completely powerless as she approached the scene where her 6-year-old daughter sat beside a wounded security guard whose blood had stained the pristine marble of her company's plaza. Every maternal instinct she had suppressed in favor of corporate responsibilities came roaring back as she saw Sophia's tear-streaked face and the protective way the injured man positioned himself between her child and the chaos of the emergency response. "Mommy," Sophia called out when she spotted Catherine approaching, her small voice cutting through the radio chatter and official conversation surrounding them. "Marcus saved me from the bad man, but he got hurt doing it, and there was a really loud noise that scared me." Catherine's legs nearly buckled as the full reality of what could have happened hit her with devastating force. In all her careful planning for corporate security, hostile takeovers, and competitive threats, she had never adequately considered that someone might target her family as a way of attacking her. The thought that she might have lost Sophia because of enemies she had made in the business world filled her with a guilt that threatened to overwhelm her legendary composure. Marcus watched Catherine's approach with the analytical eye that had served him well in assessing people under pressure, noting the way her professional mask slipped to reveal genuine terror and love when she looked at her daughter. He had read about Catherine Chen in business magazines, seen her interviews on financial news programs, but nothing had prepared him for the raw vulnerability of a mother confronting the near loss of her child. "Ma'am," Detective Brooks said, stepping forward with the practiced diplomacy of someone experienced in dealing with high-profile victims. "I'm Detective Raymond Brooks with the Metropolitan Police. Your daughter is physically unharmed, but she's been through a traumatic experience. This gentleman, Marcus Rivera, is one of your security guards, and he quite literally saved her life by putting himself between her and an armed assailant." Catherine's gaze shifted to Marcus, taking in his blood-soaked uniform, his obvious pain, and the gentle way he continued to monitor Sophia's emotional state despite his own need for medical attention. She had employed hundreds of security personnel over the years, approving budgets and protocols from the distant comfort of her executive suite, but she had never truly considered the human beings who risked their safety to protect her interests. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion she rarely allowed herself to feel, much less express in public settings. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. My daughter means everything to me, and you risked your life to keep her safe." Marcus tried to stand as she approached, his military background demanding proper respect for civilians in crisis, but the paramedic treating his shoulder wound gently pushed him back down. "Ma'am, there's no need to thank me," he said, his voice steady despite the pain medication they had administered. "Any decent person would have done the same thing. I'm just glad I was in the right place at the right time." Catherine's business instincts, honed by years of evaluating people and situations, recognized something remarkable in Marcus's response. Most people in his position would be highlighting their heroism, positioning themselves for recognition or reward, but this man seemed genuinely uncomfortable with praise and more concerned about Sophia's emotional state than his own injury. The paramedic working on Marcus's wound looked up at Catherine with professional respect. "Ma'am, Mr. Rivera has a rough-hand-throw gunshot wound to his right shoulder. The bullet missed all major arteries and bone, but he's lost some blood and needs surgery to clean and repair the muscle damage. His quick thinking and military training likely saved both his life and your daughter's." "Military training?" Catherine asked, her executive mind automatically filing away this unexpected information about an employee she realized she knew nothing about despite his 18 months of service protecting her company. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, somewhat reluctantly. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic before transitioning to civilian security work. The training comes in handy in situations like this." Catherine felt another wave of realization wash over her as she understood that this man possessed skills and experience far beyond what his current position required. She prided herself on recognizing talent and potential, on building teams of exceptional people. Yet somehow, one of the most capable individuals in her employ had been invisible to her until the moment he saved her daughter's life. Sophia suddenly broke away from Detective Brooks and moved toward Marcus, her small hand reaching out to touch his uninjured arm with the fearless compassion that children showed toward those who protected them. "Does it hurt very much?" she asked, her dark eyes reflecting the plaza lights and the concern that seemed far too mature for her age. "Not so much anymore," Marcus assured her, his voice taking on the gentle tone he used with Diego when his son worried about grown-up problems. "The nice paramedics gave me some medicine that makes it feel much better, and pretty soon the doctors are going to fix it completely." Catherine watched this interaction with growing amazement, seeing her typically shy daughter respond to this wounded stranger with a trust and affection that she rarely showed anyone outside their small family circle. Sophia had been cautious around new people since her father's death 2 years earlier, yet she seemed to instinctively recognize something safe and reliable in Marcus that drew her protective instincts even as she processed her own trauma. The paramedic began preparing Marcus for transport to the hospital, efficiently organizing equipment and coordinating with the ambulance crew while maintaining the running commentary that helped patients stay calm during medical procedures. "Mr. Rivera, we need to get you to the emergency room for surgical evaluation and treatment. The wound is stable, but you'll need antibiotics and proper suturing to prevent infection." Marcus nodded his understanding, then looked directly at Catherine with an expression that carried both respect and gentle authority. "Ma'am, if I may suggest, Sophia should probably see a counselor who specializes in childhood trauma. What happened today was scary for her, and having someone help her process it properly will make a big difference in how well she recovers emotionally." Catherine felt another surge of respect for this man who, even while being prepared for emergency surgery, was thinking about her daughter's psychological welfare with the insight of someone who clearly understood children and trauma. She realized that in all her corporate success and strategic thinking, she might have overlooked the emotional support Sophia would need to heal from this experience. "You're right, of course," Catherine said, her voice carrying the decisive tone that her employees recognized from boardroom decisions. "I'll arrange for the best pediatric trauma specialist available. Is there anything else I should know about helping her through this?" Marcus considered the question carefully, drawing on his experience helping Diego through the trauma of losing his mother and his observations of how children processed frightening experiences. "She's going to need extra reassurance for a while, maybe some trouble sleeping, possibly some reluctance to be away from you. The key is patience and consistency, letting her talk about what happened when she's ready, but not pushing her to discuss it before she feels safe." The ambulance doors stood open now, and the paramedics were ready to transport Marcus to the hospital for the surgery that would repair the damage Vincent's bullet had inflicted. Catherine realized she was about to lose the opportunity to properly express her gratitude to the man who had saved the most precious thing in her world. The emergency room at Metropolitan General Hospital buzzed with the controlled chaos that Marcus remembered from his combat medic days, The familiar symphony of monitors beeping, medical staff coordinating treatment, and the underlying urgency that permeated trauma centers. As the paramedics wheeled him through the automatic doors, Marcus felt the strange comfort of being in an environment where life-and-death decisions were routine and where highly trained professionals moved with purpose and precision. Dr. Patricia Walsh, the attending emergency physician, took charge of Marcus's case with the brisk efficiency of someone who had spent 15 years treating gunshot wounds in urban hospitals. She was a compact woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and the kind of steady hands that came from thousands of hours in operating rooms. Her initial assessment confirmed what the paramedics had reported, but she wanted to run additional tests to ensure no internal complications had been missed. "Mr. Rivera," Dr. Walsh said as she examined the entry and exit wounds, "you're extremely fortunate that this bullet passed through muscle tissue without hitting bone or major vessels. Your military training probably saved your life by teaching you how to position your body to minimize damage when you couldn't avoid being shot." Marcus managed a weak smile through the pain medication that was making everything slightly fuzzy around the edges. "I learned a long time ago that sometimes getting hurt is unavoidable, but how badly you get hurt is often a choice. I chose to protect that little girl, and I'd make the same choice again without hesitation." Dr. Walsh paused in her examination, studying Marcus with the kind of professional curiosity that came from years of treating patients whose injuries told stories about their character. Most people who came through her emergency room with gunshot wounds were either victims of random violence or participants in activities that increased their risk. It was rare to see someone who had deliberately chosen to take a bullet to protect a stranger's child. "Tell me about your military medical training, Dr." Walsh said as she prepared the local anesthetic for a more thorough examination of the wound. "I'm seeing some field dressing techniques and how you managed this injury at the scene, and the paramedics mentioned you kept yourself conscious and functional despite significant blood loss." Marcus appreciated the way she spoke to him as a fellow medical professional rather than just a patient, recognizing the expertise that had helped him survive long enough to get proper treatment. "I was a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne for 6 years, 3 deployments to Afghanistan. You learn pretty quickly how to assess and treat traumatic injuries when a nearest hospital is a helicopter ride away and you're responsible for keeping wounded soldiers alive until evacuation." The revelation that her patient was a trained medic changed Dr. Walsh's entire approach to his treatment, and she found herself discussing his injury and treatment options with the kind of professional courtesy she usually reserved for colleagues. His understanding of anatomy, infection risks, and recovery protocols made him an ideal patient who could participate intelligently in decisions about his care. "Your assessment of the wound was completely accurate," Dr. Walsh told him as she began cleaning the injury site. "The bullet damaged the deltoid and teres minor muscles, but missed the brachial plexus and axillary vessels. You'll need surgical repair of the muscle teres, but with proper rehabilitation, you should regain full function of the arm within 3 to 4 months." Marcus nodded his understanding, then felt a wave of concern as he remembered Diego waiting at the after-school program. The program closed at 7 o'clock, and if he wasn't there to pick up his son, Diego would be frightened and alone with no understanding of why his father hadn't come. The thought of his 80-year-old sitting in an empty classroom, wondering if something terrible had happened, filled Marcus with anxiety that had nothing to do with his physical injury. "Doctor, I need to make a phone call," Marcus said, trying to sit up despite the restraints of the hospital gurney. "My son is at after-school care, and they close at 7. If I'm not there to pick him up, he'll be scared, and the staff will have to call social services. He's only 8, and he's already lost his mother. I can't let him think something has happened to me, too." Dr. Walsh saw the genuine panic in Marcus's eyes and recognized the kind of parental concern that transcended physical pain and medical procedures. She had seen the same expression on countless parents' faces when injury or illness threatened to disrupt their ability to care for their children, and she had learned to treat family anxiety as seriously as she treated medical symptoms. "What's the name of the program and your son's name?" Dr. Walsh asked, pulling out her cell phone with the practiced efficiency of someone who had made similar calls many times before. "I'll contact them directly and explain that you've been injured in the line of duty and will be delayed. They'll keep Diego safe until we can arrange for someone to pick him up." Marcus felt some of the tension leave his body as he provided the contact information, grateful to have found someone who understood that his responsibilities as a father didn't pause for medical emergencies. "Diego Rivera," he said, spelling out the details carefully. "He's in the Tiger Group at Sunshine Elementary's after-school program. The director is Mrs. Chun, and she knows me well enough to understand this isn't like me." As Dr. Walsh made the call, Marcus lay back on the gurney and tried to process everything that had happened in the space of a few hours. This morning he had been just another security guard completing routine rounds, invisible to the executives and employees who worked in the towers he protected. Now he was in a hospital bed, being treated for a gunshot wound sustained while saving the daughter of one of the city's most powerful business leaders. The irony wasn't lost on him that Catherine Chun, whose name appeared on his paychecks, and whose company employed him, had never known he existed until the moment he threw himself between her child and a gun. For 18 months, he had been part of the invisible workforce that kept her business running smoothly, one of hundreds of employees whose names never appeared in board meetings or executive reports. Dr. Walsh returned from her phone call with reassuring news. "Mrs. Chun at the after-school program sends her regards and wants you to know that Diego is fine and will be kept safe as long as necessary. She said to tell you that Diego is helping with cleanup activities and seems proud when she told the other children that his father is a hero who saved someone today." The word hero made Marcus uncomfortable, just as Catherine's gratitude had earlier. He had simply done what any decent person should do when faced with a child in danger, drawing on training and instincts that have been developed for exactly those situations. The idea that his actions were somehow extraordinary felt wrong to someone who had served alongside genuine heroes in combat zones overseas. "I'm not a hero, doctor," Marcus said quietly. "I'm just a father who couldn't stand by and watch another parent's child get hurt. Any decent person would have done the same thing if they'd been in my position with my training." Dr. Walsh had heard similar denials from other patients who had risked themselves for strangers, and she recognized the humility that often characterized people who performed genuinely heroic acts. In her experience, the real heroes were usually the ones who insisted they weren't heroes, while those who sought recognition for their actions rarely deserved it. "Mr. Rivera, in 15 years of emergency medicine, I've treated hundreds of gunshot victims," Dr. Walsh said as she prepared him for transport to surgery. "Most of them were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or made poor choices that put them in danger. You're the first patient I've had who was shot because he deliberately placed himself between a child and a gunman. That makes you a hero whether you're comfortable with the label or not." The surgical team was ready now, and Marcus felt the familiar floating sensation that came with preoperative medication. As they wheeled him toward the operating room, his last conscious thought was of Sophia's frightened face and the way she had trusted him to keep her safe, and of Diego waiting at school, proud to tell his friends that his father was a hero. The surgery lasted 2 hours, during which Catherine Chun found herself pacing the hospital waiting room with an anxiety she hadn't experienced since her own daughter's birth 6 years earlier. She had arranged for her personal assistant to handle the corporate crisis management aspects of the incident, while she focused entirely on Sophia's needs and ensuring Marcus received the best possible medical care. It felt strange to prioritize personal concerns over business obligations, but the events of the day had shifted something fundamental in her perspective on what truly mattered. Sophia sat curled in one of the waiting room chairs, clutching a stuffed elephant that Catherine's assistant had purchased from the hospital gift shop. The little girl had been unusually quiet since leaving the plaza, processing the trauma in the way children did, with long periods of silence punctuated by sudden questions about Marcus's condition and when she would be able to see him again. Dr. Walsh emerged from the surgical suite, still wearing her scrubs, her expression carrying the satisfied exhaustion that followed successful operations. She approached Catherine with the kind of professional courtesy that acknowledged both the gravity of the situation and Catherine's obvious concern for her employees' welfare. Ms. Chun, the surgery went very well, Dr. Walsh announced, settling into the chair across from Catherine and Sophia. Mr. Rivera's injuries were exactly as we anticipated from the initial examination. We've repaired the muscle damage, cleaned the wound thoroughly, and addressed some minor nerve irritation caused by the bullet's path. He should make a complete recovery with proper rehabilitation. Catherine felt a wave of relief that surprised her with its intensity, followed immediately by guilt that she cared so much about an employee she had barely known existed 12 hours earlier. Thank you, doctor. When will he be able to return to work, and what kind of ongoing medical care will he need? Dr. Walsh studied Catherine with the kind of professional assessment she used to evaluate family members and their ability to support patient recovery. He'll need 6 to 8 weeks of physical therapy to regain full strength and range of motion, and he shouldn't return to any kind of physical security work for at least 3 months. However, his military medical training means he understands rehabilitation protocols better than most patients, which should accelerate his recovery significantly. The mention of Marcus's military background reminded Catherine of how little she actually knew about the man who had risked his life for her daughter. She prided herself on understanding her key employees, on recognizing talent and potential within her organization. Yet Marcus had been completely invisible to her despite possessing qualifications that far exceeded his current role. Doctor, when you mentioned his military medical training, exactly what kind of experience are we talking about? Catherine asked, her executive instincts automatically gathering information that might be relevant to future decisions about Marcus's employment and career development. Mr. Rivera served as a combat medic with the 82nd Airborne Division, with 3 deployments to Afghanistan, Dr. Walsh explained. He has advanced trauma treatment certification, field surgery experience, and the kind of crisis management skills that kept wounded soldiers alive in combat zones. He's also mentioned having an MBA in cybersecurity, though he didn't elaborate on how he transitioned from military service to civilian security work. Catherine felt another wave of amazement as she realized that one of the most qualified individuals she might ever encounter had been working an entry-level security position at her company for over a year. The combination of medical training, military leadership experience, advanced education, and proven courage under fire represented exactly the kind of multidimensional talent she actively recruited for executive positions. Sophia looked up from her stuffed elephant with the kind of direct honesty that children brought to adult conversations. Mommy, Marcus told me he has a little boy named Diego who's 8 years old like my friend Emma. He was worried about picking him up from school because he didn't want Diego to be scared when his daddy didn't come on time. The revelation that Marcus was a single father added another dimension to Catherine's growing understanding of his character and circumstances. A man with his qualifications taking an entry-level security job suggested financial necessity rather than lack of ambition, and the devotion he had shown towards Sophia indicated the kind of protective parental instincts that came from raising a child alone. Dr. Walsh nodded confirmation of Sophia's statement. He was quite concerned about his son during the preoperative preparation. We contacted the after-school program and arranged for extended care, and apparently Diego was very proud when told that his father had saved someone today. The boy seems to understand that his father is a hero, even if Mr. Rivera doesn't see himself that way. Catherine found herself thinking about the contrast between Marcus's situation and her own, recognizing parallels she had never considered before. Both were single parents trying to balance demanding careers with the responsibilities of raising children alone, but where she had built financial security and professional success. Marcus had apparently sacrificed career advancement to ensure stability and health insurance for his son. Is he awake yet? Sophia asked, sliding off her chair to stand closer to Dr. Walsh. I want to tell him thank you again, and I want to meet Diego because Marcus talked about him like he's really nice, and maybe we could be friends. Dr. Walsh smiled at Sophia's earnest concern, recognizing the kind of genuine affection that trauma sometimes created between victims and their rescuers. He's in recovery now and should be awake within the next hour. Once we're sure he's stable and alert, you'll be able to visit with him briefly. However, he'll be quite tired from the surgery and pain medication, so the visit should be short. Catherine made a mental note to ensure that Marcus's medical expenses were fully covered by the company's insurance, along with any rehabilitation costs and salary continuation during his recovery period. It was the least she could do for someone who had literally taken a bullet to protect her child, though she suspected Marcus would be uncomfortable with any gesture that seemed like charity rather than earned benefit. The waiting room door opened, and a young boy with Marcus's dark eyes and serious expression entered hesitantly, holding the hand of an older woman who was obviously a family friend or neighbor. Catherine recognized immediately that this must be Diego, and she felt her heart tighten as she saw the concern and confusion in his 80-year-old face. "Mrs. Rodriguez found me at the school when Daddy didn't come," Diego said to Dr. Walsh, having been directed to her as the person in charge of his father's care. "She told me Daddy got hurt helping someone, but she didn't know if he was going to be okay. Is my daddy going to be all right?" Dr. Walsh knelt down to Diego's eye level with the gentle bedside manner she had developed for pediatric situations. "Your daddy is going to be perfectly fine," she assured him. "He was very brave today and helped save this little girl from someone who wanted to hurt her. He got injured in the process, but we've fixed him up, and he's going to recover completely." Diego's gaze shifted to Sophia, taking in her expensive clothes and the way Catherine hovered protectively nearby, clearly processing the information that his father had risked himself for strangers who came from a very different world than their own. "Are you the little girl my daddy saved?" he asked Sophia with the direct curiosity that children brought to new situations. Sophia nodded solemnly, clutching her stuffed elephant tighter as she met Diego's serious gaze. "Your daddy is the bravest person I ever met," she said with the absolute certainty that 6-year-olds brought to their pronouncements. "He stood in front of me when the bad man had a gun, and he got hurt because he was protecting me." Catherine watched this exchange between the children and felt something shift in her understanding of the day's events and their broader implications. These weren't just random people whose lives had intersected through crisis. They were families whose futures had become connected through an act of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. Marcus awakened gradually from the post-surgical haze, his consciousness returning in waves as the anesthesia slowly cleared from his system. The first thing he noticed was the absence of the burning pain that had dominated his awareness since Vincent's bullet tore through his shoulder, replaced now by a manageable ache that spoke of successful medical intervention and effective pain management. The second thing he noticed was Diego's small hand wrapped carefully around his uninjured left hand, his son's dark head resting against the hospital bed's rail as he dozed in the bedside chair. The sight of Diego sleeping peacefully beside him filled Marcus with the profound relief that came from knowing his son was safe and cared for during his absence. The 80-year-old's face showed none of the anxiety or fear that Marcus had worried about, instead displaying the peaceful expression of a child who knew his father was going to be all right and that the adult world had functioned properly to protect them both during crisis. Marcus carefully squeezed Diego's hand, not wanting to startle him, but needing the physical connection that would confirm this wasn't a medication-induced dream. Diego's eyes opened immediately with the alert awareness that children developed when they had learned to monitor their parents' condition through illness or injury, a skill that no 80-year-old should need, but that Diego had mastered during the months following Elena's death. "Daddy," Diego whispered, sitting up straight in his chair while maintaining his gentle grip on Marcus's hand. "Mrs. Rodriguez said you were a hero today and that you saved a little girl from a bad man. Are you really okay? The doctor said you were going to be fine, but you look really tired." Marcus managed a reassuring smile despite the lingering effects of the anesthesia and pain medication. "I'm going to be perfectly fine, mijo," he said, using the Spanish endearment that always made Diego smile. "The doctors fixed everything that was broken, and in a few weeks I'll be as good as new. But tell me, how are you doing? I know it must have been scary when I didn't kind of pick you up on time." Diego considered the question with the seriousness that had characterized his personality even before losing his mother, weighing his words carefully as he processed emotions that were complex for someone his age. I was worried at first when Mrs. Chun said you were delayed, but then Mrs. Rodriguez came and explained that you were helping someone who needed you. She said that's what heroes do, and that I should be proud of you." The pride in Diego's voice was unmistakable, and Marcus felt a familiar mixture of gratitude and guilt that his son had learned to find strength in circumstances that should never have touched a child's life. Diego had shown remarkable resilience after Elena's death, adapting to their reduced circumstances and his father's demanding work schedule with a maturity that both impressed and saddened Marcus. The hospital room door opened quietly, and Catherine Chun entered with Sophia close beside her, both moving with the careful consideration that people showed in medical environments. Marcus tried to sit up straighter despite his injury, his ingrained respect for authority and civilians compelling him to show proper courtesy even while confined to a hospital bed. "Mr. Rivera, please don't try to get up," Catherine said, approaching the bed with an expression that combined genuine gratitude with professional assessment. "I wanted to check on your condition personally and to introduce you properly to my daughter, since your first meeting was under rather extraordinary circumstances." Sophia stepped forward with the kind of shy courage that children showed when approaching someone who had become important to them through dramatic events. "Hi, Marcus," she said softly, her dark eyes reflecting both gratitude and the lingering traces of trauma from their shared experience. "I wanted to say thank you again for keeping me safe, and to tell you that I'm sorry you got hurt because of me." Marcus felt his heart constrict at the self-blame he heard in her voice, recognizing the way children often assumed responsibility for adult actions and consequences. "Sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for," he said with the gentle firmness he used when Diego needed reassurance about things beyond his control. "I didn't get hurt because of you. I got hurt because a bad man made bad choices, and I chose to make sure those choices couldn't hurt you." Diego looked between Sophia and his father with growing understanding of the day's events, processing the information that his father had risked his life for this well-dressed little girl who came from a world very different from their own. "Are you the girl my daddy saved?" he asked Sophia with the direct curiosity that 80-year-olds brought to new situations. "Yes," Sophia replied, moving closer to Diego's chair with the instinctive recognition that children had for peers who understood difficult experiences. "Your daddy is the bravest person I ever met. He stood between me and the scary man even when the man had a gun, and he got hurt making sure I stayed safe." Catherine watched this exchange between the children while simultaneously observing Marcus's interaction with his son, noting the obvious closeness between father and son and the way Diego looked at Marcus with complete trust and admiration. Her executive instincts, trained to assess people and situations quickly, recognized qualities in both Marcus and Diego that spoke of strong character and resilience developed through genuine hardship. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine said, settling into another chair beside the hospital bed, "I've learned quite a bit about your background from Dr. Walsh and Detective Brooks. Your military service, your medical training, your educational qualifications. I have to admit, I'm somewhat embarrassed that I employed someone with your credentials for 18 months without recognizing your potential or offering opportunities more suited to your abilities." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, sensing that Catherine's gratitude might lead to offers of assistance that would feel too much like charity. "Ma'am, I appreciate the sentiment, but I took the security position because it met my family's needs for stable employment with health insurance. My qualifications don't entitle me to anything more than what I've earned through my work performance." Catherine recognized the pride in Marcus's response and respected his unwillingness to accept what he might perceive as unearned advancement. However, her business instincts told her that someone with his combination of skills, character, and proven courage under pressure represented exactly the kind of talent her company needed in leadership positions. "I understand your perspective, and I respect your independence," Catherine replied. "But I'm not talking about charity or special treatment based on today's events. I'm talking about the fact that my company apparently has an employee with advanced cybersecurity education, military leadership experience, medical training, and demonstrated crisis management abilities, working in a position that utilizes almost none of those qualifications. Diego listened to this adult conversation with the kind of intense attention that children brought to discussions that might affect their lives, clearly processing the possibility that this important woman might offer his father opportunities that could change their circumstances. Marcus squeezed his son's hand gently, recognizing Diego's concern and wanting to reassure him that whatever happened, their relationship and stability would remain the top priority. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Walsh's return for a post-surgical check, her professional presence shifting the focus back to Marcus's immediate medical needs and recovery timeline. However, Catherine made a mental note to continue this discussion once Marcus was fully recovered and able to consider career opportunities from a position of health and strength rather than vulnerability and gratitude. 3 days into Marcus's hospital stay, Catherine found herself visiting more frequently than she had originally intended, drawn by a combination of genuine concern for his recovery and growing fascination with a man who had literally taken a bullet to protect her daughter. Each conversation revealed new layers of his character and experience, from his thoughtful insights about childhood trauma recovery to his detailed understanding of corporate security vulnerabilities that most of her highly paid consultants had missed entirely. Diego had become a regular fixture in the hospital room, arriving each afternoon after school with homework assignments that he completed quietly while his father rested, occasionally asking for help with math problems that Marcus solved effortlessly despite the lingering effects of pain medication. Catherine observed these interactions with growing appreciation for the strength of their relationship and the way Marcus maintained his parental responsibilities even while recovering from surgery. Sophia had insisted on visiting daily as well, bringing drawings she had made for Marcus and small gifts from the hospital gift shop that she purchased with careful consideration for what might make him feel better. Her attachment to Marcus had deepened beyond simple gratitude into the kind of genuine affection that children reserve for adults who had proven themselves completely trustworthy and safe. The afternoon of Marcus's 3rd day in the hospital, Catherine arrived to find him sitting up in bed, reviewing a laptop computer that Detective Brooks had brought containing the preliminary report on Vincent Torres's background and motivations. Marcus's expression was serious as he scrolled through the documentation, his professional instincts clearly engaged despite his medical condition. "This is troubling," Marcus said to Detective Brooks, pointing at specific sections of the report. Torres had detailed knowledge of building security protocols, employee schedules, and physical access points that goes well beyond what he should have retained from his termination 18 months ago. Someone has been feeding him current information about the company's operations and your daughter's routine. Detective Brooks nodded grimly, having reached similar conclusions during his investigation. "We suspect Torres had help from at least one current employee, possibly someone in facilities management or security who had access to updated protocols. The level of planning involved in his approach suggests months of preparation and inside intelligence." Catherine felt a chill as she realized the implications of what they were discussing. Her daughter's near kidnapping hadn't been a random act of revenge, but a carefully orchestrated plot involving current employees who had betrayed their positions of trust. The thought that people she employed had conspired to harm Sophia filled her with a fury that she rarely allowed herself to feel about business matters. "Mr. Rivera," Detective Brooks continued, "your military intelligence background might be helpful in identifying the security gaps that allowed this breach. We're particularly interested in your assessment of how Torres gained access to the plaza area during shift changes when surveillance coverage should have been complete." Marcus studied the security timeline with the analytical mind that had served him well in combat zones where overlooking details could cost lives. The shift change at 5:30 created a 12-minute window where the main plaza had reduced patrol coverage, he explained, pointing to specific times on the report. Torres would have needed someone to confirm that timing and ensure he could approach without being intercepted by roving security. Catherine watched Marcus's professional analysis with growing amazement at the depth of his strategic thinking and attention to detail. His insights were more sophisticated than those provided by the expensive security consulting firm she had hired to evaluate corporate vulnerabilities just 6 months earlier. Yet he had been working an entry-level position that utilized almost none of his analytical abilities. Diego looked up from his homework assignment, having absorbed enough of the adult conversation to understand that his father was helping solve the puzzle of how the bad man had been able to get close to Sophia. "My daddy is really smart about keeping people safe," he said to Catherine with obvious pride. "He always knows when something might be dangerous before it happens." The simple observation from Diego highlighted something that Catherine was beginning to understand about Marcus's character and capabilities. His situational awareness and protective instincts weren't just products of military training, but fundamental aspects of his personality that had been sharpened by experience and responsibility. He saw threats and vulnerabilities that others missed because he had learned to think like someone whose job was keeping people alive. Detective Brooks gathered his materials and prepared to leave, but not before addressing Catherine's obvious concerns about ongoing security. "Ms. Chun, until we identify and arrest Torres's accomplices, I recommend enhanced personal protection for both you and Sophia. The conspiracy involved detailed planning, and we can't assume the threat ended with Torres's capture." Catherine felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with being a high-profile business leader, but now it was magnified by maternal fears she had never fully considered before this incident. The idea that her success had made her daughter a target filled her with guilt and determination to find better ways to protect Sophia without imprisoning her in a security bubble. After Detective Brooks left, Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his hospital bed, clearly preparing to address something he had been considering during the investigative discussion. "Ms. Chun, if I may make a suggestion about Sophia's security, I think you should consider changes that focus on unpredictability rather than increased visibility. More bodyguards and obvious protection actually make her a more attractive target for people seeking revenge against you." Catherine leaned forward, recognizing that Marcus was offering insights based on professional expertise rather than emotional reaction to the attack. "What kind of changes are you thinking about?" she asked, her executive mind already processing the strategic implications of his suggestion. "Vary her routine randomly. Use different pickup locations and times. Employ protection that doesn't look like traditional security," Marcus explained, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had planned and executed protection operations in hostile environments. "The goal is making it impossible for potential threats to predict when and where she'll be vulnerable, rather than making it obvious that she's being protected." Sophia, who had been coloring quietly at the bedside table, looked up with the kind of serious attention that children brought to discussions about their safety. "Marcus, does that mean I can't go to the fountain anymore? I really like watching the water and listening to the sounds it makes." Marcus's expression softened as he addressed her concern, recognizing that children needed reassurance about maintaining the parts of their lives that brought them joy. "You can still enjoy beautiful places like the fountain, sweetheart," he assured her. "We just need to make sure that bad people can't figure out when you'll be there or plan ways to hurt you. It's like a game of staying safe while still having fun." Catherine watched this interaction with growing respect for Marcus's ability to explain complex security concepts to a 6-year-old without frightening her or making her feel that her world was becoming permanently restricted. His natural way with children, combined with his professional expertise, represented exactly the kind of multidimensional capability that she valued most in her executive team. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus's physical therapist, an energetic woman in her 30s who had been working with him daily to prevent muscle atrophy and begin the rehabilitation process. Catherine realized this was her cue to leave, but found herself reluctant to end a discussion that had revealed so much about Marcus's strategic thinking and leadership potential. On the evening before Marcus's scheduled hospital discharge, Catherine arrived at his room carrying a leather portfolio that contained documents she had spent the previous day preparing with her human resources team and executive staff. Her decision had been building throughout the week as she witnessed his analytical capabilities, leadership qualities, and the depth of his professional expertise that had been completely wasted in his security guard position. Diego was curled up in the bedside chair, reading a chapter book while Marcus worked through physical therapy exercises designed to restore strength and mobility to his injured shoulder. The sight of the 80-year-old contentedly absorbed in his reading while monitoring his father's condition spoke to the resilience and maturity that both father and son had developed through their shared challenges and losses. Sophia sat at the small table near the window, carefully arranging the get-well cards she had made throughout the week, each one featuring detailed drawings of Marcus protecting her from the bad man, with herself and Diego holding hands in the safety of his protection. Her artistic interpretation of the events revealed how thoroughly she had processed the trauma and transformed it into a story of heroism and family connection. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine said, settling into the chair she had occupied during most of her visits, "I have a proposition for you that I hope you'll consider carefully. I've spoken with my executive team about creating a new position in our company, Director of Integrated Security, that would utilize your military intelligence background, cybersecurity education, and demonstrated leadership abilities." Marcus looked up from his therapy exercises with an expression that combined gratitude with wariness, clearly concerned about accepting what might appear to be a reward for heroism rather than a legitimate career opportunity. "Ms. Chun, I appreciate the thought, but I don't want special treatment based on what happened with Sophia. Any job offer should be based on qualifications and company needs, not on gratitude for personal actions." Catherine had anticipated this response and had structured her proposal specifically to address his concerns about charity or preferential treatment. "This position isn't being created because of what happened in the plaza," she explained, opening her portfolio to reveal detailed job descriptions and organizational charts. "It's being created because our investigation revealed security vulnerabilities that require someone with your unique combination of skills to address properly." She spread the documents on Marcus's bedside table, showing him the comprehensive analysis her team had conducted of the company's security gaps and the strategic plan they had developed for addressing systemic weaknesses that went far beyond the physical protection issues that had enabled Vincent Torres's attack. "Our current security structure treats physical security, cybersecurity, and personnel security as separate departments with minimal coordination," Catherine continued, pointing to organizational charts that illustrated the communication gaps and redundant responsibilities that weakened overall protection. "We need someone who understands all three areas and can integrate them into a comprehensive security strategy." Marcus studied the documents with the analytical attention he brought to complex problems, his professional instincts engaged despite his personal reluctance to accept what might appear to be advancement based on gratitude rather than merit. The position description revealed a scope of responsibility that would challenge his strategic thinking and utilize every aspect of his military and educational background. "This is a significant executive role," Marcus observed, reviewing the salary range and benefits package that accompanied the job description. "It will be a major career change from security patrol work with responsibilities that affect the entire company's operations. Are you certain this isn't influenced by what happened with Sophia?" Diego looked up from his book with the kind of intense attention that children brought to conversations that might affect their family's future. "Daddy, does this mean you wouldn't have to work at night anymore?" he asked with obvious hope. "And we could maybe get a bigger apartment with 2 bedrooms so I don't have to sleep on the couch?" The innocent questions from his son reminded Marcus of the practical realities that had driven his career choices since Elena's death. The need to prioritize stability and health insurance over professional advancement or personal satisfaction. The position Catherine was offering represented not just career growth, but the possibility of providing Diego with the kind of secure childhood that every parent wanted for their child. Catherine felt her heart tighten as she realized the full extent of the financial constraints that had led someone with Marcus's qualifications to work a low-paying security job without opportunities for advancement. His willingness to sacrifice career potential for his son's immediate needs spoke to the same character that had driven him to take a bullet protecting her daughter. "Mr. Rivera, let me be completely honest about my motivations," Catherine said, her voice carrying the directness that had built her business reputation. "Yes, I'm grateful for what you did for Sophia, and that gratitude will always influence how I think about you and your family. But this job offer is based on cold business analysis of what my company needs to address serious security vulnerabilities that could cost us millions of dollars and potentially lives if not handled properly. She pulled out additional documents showing the financial impact of security breaches at other technology companies and the projected costs of implementing comprehensive security integration across all corporate divisions. The numbers represented business realities that had nothing to do with personal gratitude and everything to do with protecting corporate assets and personnel. Marcus reviewed the business case with growing recognition that Catherine was offering him a legitimate executive opportunity based on genuine organizational needs rather than charitable impulses driven by gratitude. The scope of the position would allow him to use his full range of skills and experience while providing the financial stability that would transform Diego's childhood and future opportunities. Sophia finished arranging her cards and moved closer to the bed, looking between Marcus and her mother with the intuitive understanding that children developed about adult conversations that would affect their relationships. Marcus, if you work for Mommy in the big building, does that mean Diego and I can be friends and see each other more often? The question highlighted an aspect of the offer that Marcus hadn't fully considered. The way accepting this position would deepen the connection between their families and create ongoing relationships that went far beyond the crisis that had brought them together. Diego would gain not just financial security, but also friendship with Sophia and access to opportunities that his current circumstances would never provide. I need to think about this carefully, Marcus said finally, his voice reflecting the weight of a decision that would affect not just his career, but Diego's entire future. It's an incredible opportunity, and I'm honored that you think I'm capable of handling responsibilities at this level. But I also need to make sure I'm accepting for the right reasons and that I can deliver the results your company needs. Catherine recognized the thoughtfulness in his response and respected his need to process such a significant life change carefully. Take all the time you need, she said, gathering her documents while leaving copies for his review. This offer isn't going anywhere, and I'd rather have you accept when you're completely confident about your decision than feel pressure by gratitude or circumstances. 2 weeks after his discharge from the hospital, Marcus sat in his small apartment's only chair, reviewing the comprehensive security integration proposal he had spent every evening preparing since Catherine's job offer. His right arm remained in a sling, but his analytical abilities were unimpaired, and he had thrown himself into understanding every aspect of Chun Technologies' security vulnerabilities with the thoroughness that had characterized his military intelligence work. Diego occupied the apartment's fold-out couch that served as both living room seating and his bedroom, working on homework assignments while occasionally glancing at his father with the kind of patient attention that 80-year-olds developed when they sensed important adult decisions being made. The cramped quarters that had been their home for 18 months seemed even smaller now that Marcus had glimpsed the possibility of providing his son with better living conditions and expanded opportunities. The security analysis Marcus had compiled revealed systemic weaknesses that went far beyond the physical access issues that had enabled Vincent Torres's attack. Cybersecurity protocols were outdated. Personnel screening procedures had dangerous gaps, and the lack of communication between security departments created vulnerability windows that sophisticated attackers could exploit with devastating effectiveness. His military experience had taught him to think like an enemy when assessing defensive positions, and applying that mindset to Chun Technologies had revealed dozens of potential attack vectors that the current security structure couldn't adequately address. The company needed exactly the kind of integrated security approach that Catherine had described, and Marcus knew he possessed the unique combination of skills necessary to implement such a comprehensive system. The apartment's phone rang, interrupting his concentration, and Diego answered with the responsible manner he had developed as Marcus's primary support system during the recovery period. "Hi, Ms. Chun," Diego said, his voice brightening with obvious pleasure at hearing from Sophia's mother. "Daddy is working on the security papers you gave him. He's been reading and writing lots of notes every night." Marcus accepted the phone with a smile at Diego's informal description of his intensive analysis project. "Good evening, Ms. Chun," he said, settling back in his chair despite the lingering discomfort in his shoulder. "I've been working through the security assessment you requested, and I have to say, the challenges are even more complex than I initially realized." Catherine's voice carried the focused attention that she brought to business discussions. But Marcus could also hear the personal concern that had developed during their hospital conversations. "I'm very interested in your preliminary findings," she said. "Would you be willing to meet tomorrow morning to discuss your analysis? I can arrange for childcare for Diego if that would help with scheduling." The offer of childcare assistance touched Marcus with its consideration for his practical challenges as a single parent, but he had already made arrangements that would allow Diego to witness this important moment in their family's future. "Actually, I was hoping Diego could accompany me to the meeting," Marcus said. "This decision affects both of us, and I think you should understand what we're considering before I make any commitments." Diego looked up from his homework with obvious excitement at the prospect of visiting the impressive Chin Technologies building and seeing where his father might work in his new position. "Can I really come with you, Daddy?" he asked, his dark eyes reflecting the same mixture of hope and caution that had characterized his personality since Elena's death. "Of course you can come, Mijo," Marcus assured him, using the endearment that always made Diego smile. "This is a family decision, and you're the most important part of this family. I want you to see the place where I might work and meet the people I'd be working with." The following morning, Marcus and Diego arrived at Chin Technologies dressed in their best clothes. Diego wearing the button-down shirt and dress pants they had purchased for Elena's funeral, and Marcus in the one business suit he had maintained from his pre-military professional life. Both father and son moved through the impressive lobby with a quiet dignity that came from understanding they belonged in professional environments, even if their current circumstances didn't always reflect that truth. Catherine met them personally at the executive elevator, accompanied by Sophia, who had insisted on being present for what she somehow understood was an important moment for her new friends. The little girl wore a navy dress similar to the one she had been wearing during the Plaza incident, but her demeanor was completely different now, confident and happy rather than frightened and vulnerable. "Marcus, Diego," Sophia called out, running to hug both of them with the uninhibited affection that children showed toward people who had proven themselves completely trustworthy. "Mommy said you might come work in our building, and I told her you should have the biggest office because you're the bravest person I know." Diego returned Sophia's hug with the shy pleasure that came from being welcomed by someone he had begun to consider a friend, despite the obvious differences in their backgrounds and circumstances. The two children had bonded over their shared experience of having single parents who worked demanding jobs, finding common ground that transcended economic and social differences. The executive conference room, where Catherine led them, was impressive but not intimidating, designed to facilitate serious business discussions while maintaining the kind of comfortable atmosphere that encouraged open communication. Marcus had requested this formal meeting setting rather than Catherine's office because he wanted his acceptance of the position to be clearly understood as a professional decision rather than a personal favor. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine began once they were all seated, "I've been looking forward to hearing your analysis of our security integration needs. Your preliminary comments suggested that the challenges are more extensive than our current systems can handle effectively." Marcus opened the portfolio he had prepared, revealing charts, diagrams, and detailed recommendations that represented hundreds of hours of analytical work compressed into the 2 weeks since his hospital discharge. His presentation was thorough and professional, demonstrating not just his understanding of the company's vulnerabilities, but his strategic vision for addressing them systematically. The current security structure treats physical security, cybersecurity, and personnel security as independent functions, Marcus explained, pointing to organizational charts that illustrated the communication gaps and overlapping responsibilities that weakened overall protection. An integrated approach would create unified threat assessment, coordinated response protocols, and comprehensive vulnerability management that addresses the company's actual risk profile. Catherine listened to his presentation with growing appreciation for the depth of his strategic thinking and his ability to translate complex security concepts into actionable business strategies. His recommendations were sophisticated and practical, representing exactly the kind of comprehensive approach that our company needed to protect both its assets and its people effectively. Diego watched his father's professional presentation with obvious pride, seeing Marcus in the executive environment where his education and experience could be fully utilized rather than the security uniform that had hidden his true capabilities from most people. The 80-year-old might not understand all the technical details, but he could clearly see that his father belonged in this setting and that these important people respected his knowledge and expertise. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need," Catherine said after Marcus completed his presentation. "Your analysis identifies vulnerabilities that our current security consultants missed entirely, and your integration plan addresses systemic weaknesses that could have serious consequences if left unaddressed." Marcus felt a surge of professional satisfaction at her positive response, but he still needed to address the personal concerns that had made him hesitant to accept her initial offer. "Miss Chun, before I give you my decision about the position, I need to be completely clear about my motivations and expectations. I'm accepting this offer because I believe I can deliver the results your company needs, not because of gratitude for what happened with Sophia or sympathy for my circumstances as a single father." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his corner office on the 32nd floor of Chin Technologies, reviewing the quarterly security report that documented the dramatic improvements in threat detection and prevention since implementing his integrated security protocols. The view from his window encompassed the plaza where he had once walked patrol routes as a security guard, a daily reminder of how completely his life had been transformed by a single moment of choosing courage over safety. Diego burst through the office door with the confident energy of a 9-year-old who had grown accustomed to visiting his father's executive workplace, his backpack bouncing as he ran toward Marcus's desk with obvious excitement. "Daddy, guess what happened at school today?" he announced, his face glowing with pride. "Mrs. Henderson said my essay about heroes was the best in the entire 4th grade, and she wants to submit it to the district writing contest." Marcus felt his heart swell with paternal pride as he knelt down to receive Diego's enthusiastic hug, marveling at how much his son had flourished since they moved into their spacious 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood with excellent schools and safe playgrounds. The transformation in Diego's confidence and academic performance reflected not just improved circumstances, but the security that came from seeing his father valued and respected in his professional role. Sophia appeared in the doorway moments later, accompanied by Catherine, who was returning from the board meeting where she had presented the annual security report that highlighted Marcus's exceptional performance and the measurable improvements in corporate protection. The little girl had recovered completely from her trauma, channeling her experience into a mature understanding of courage and protection that influenced her interactions with other children and adults. "Marcus," Sophia called out, running to join the reunion hug that had become a regular ritual when the children visited the office together after school. "Diego told me about his essay, and I think you should read it to us because it's about you and how you saved me and changed everything for our families." Catherine watched this scene with the kind of deep contentment that came from witnessing the positive consequences of difficult decisions made under pressure. Her choice to recognize Marcus's true potential and offer him opportunities matching his capabilities had benefited not just their individual families, but the entire company, which now enjoyed the most comprehensive and effective security infrastructure in the technology industry. The afternoon sun streaming through the office windows illuminated the framed commendation from the mayor's office that hung beside Marcus's military service medals and Diego's artwork, creating a visual story of service, sacrifice, and eventual recognition that had transformed humble circumstances into opportunities for growth and contribution. The office reflected not just professional success, but the integration of family values into corporate achievement. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine said, settling into one of the comfortable chairs that faced Marcus's desk, "I wanted to personally deliver the news that the board has approved your recommendation for the new Employee Family Support Program. Your proposal for child care assistance, flexible scheduling, and educational support services was exactly the kind of comprehensive approach that makes our company an industry leader in employee retention and satisfaction. Marcus felt a surge of professional satisfaction that was deepened by personal meaning, knowing that his initiative would help other single parents avoid the financial pressures and career limitations he had faced before Catherine recognized his potential. The program represented his commitment to ensuring that talented individuals weren't trapped in positions beneath their capabilities by circumstances beyond their control. Diego pulled out his essay and began reading with a clear voice and confident posture that reflected his improved self-esteem and expanded opportunities. My daddy is a hero not just because he took a bullet to save Sophia, but because he shows every day that being brave means protecting people who need help and working hard to make things better for everyone around you. The essay continued with Diego's 9-year-old perspective on heroism, describing how his father had transformed from a nighttime security guard into an executive who made important decisions about keeping people safe, but emphasizing that the real heroism lay in the daily choices to serve others and maintain integrity regardless of recognition or reward. Sophia listened with the kind of intense attention that reflected her own understanding of heroism and protection, occasionally nodding her agreement with Diego's observations about what made their father figure special. Her relationship with Marcus had evolved into the kind of trust and affection that children showed toward adults who had proven themselves completely reliable and safe. The essay concluded with Diego's reflection on how the scary day at the plaza had led to wonderful changes for both families, not just because of improved circumstances, but because they had learned that courage and kindness created connections that made everyone stronger and happier. His childish wisdom captured truths about human nature and community that many adults struggled to understand or articulate. Catherine felt tears threatening as she listened to Diego's essay, recognizing in his words the same insight and emotional intelligence that characterized his father's approach to leadership and problem-solving. The boy's perspective on heroism reflected the values that Marcus had instilled through example rather than lecture, creating a young man who understood that true strength came from protecting and serving others. "That was beautiful, Mijo," Marcus said, pulling Diego close while including Sophia in their embrace. "You understand something very important about what it means to be a good person and a good citizen. I'm proud not just of your writing, but of your heart and the way you think about helping other people." The office phone rang with a distinctive tone that indicated an urgent security matter requiring executive attention, and Marcus answered with the calm professionalism that had become his trademark in crisis situations. After a brief conversation, he turned to Catherine with the kind of focused attention that she had learned to associate with serious security concerns. "We have a situation developing at the research facility," Marcus reported, already moving toward his emergency response protocols. "Attempted unauthorized access by individuals with sophisticated technical equipment. I need to coordinate our response and ensure all personnel are safe before we assess what they might have been attempting to access." Catherine watched Marcus transition smoothly into crisis management mode, his military training and executive experience combining to create the kind of leadership presence that inspired confidence and coordinated effective action. The contrast with his previous role as a patrol security guard highlighted how dramatically proper recognition and opportunity had unlocked his full potential. "Children, you'll need to wait here in the office while Marcus and I handle this situation," Catherine said, activating the child care protocols they had established for exactly these circumstances. "Mrs. Patterson will be here in 5 minutes to stay with you, and we'll be back as soon as we've ensured everyone's safety." As they prepared to leave for the emergency response, Marcus paused to look back at Diego and Sophia, who were settling in with coloring books and homework assignments, completely secure in the knowledge that their parents would handle whatever challenges arose and return safely. The trust in their faces reflected the foundation of safety and stability that had grown from a moment of crisis into lasting family connections. The story that had begun with a single father working night security to provide for his son had evolved into a tale of recognition, opportunity, and the way courage under pressure could reveal character that transformed not just individual lives, but entire communities of people committed to protecting and serving each other. If this story touched your heart, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've witnessed similar acts of courage that changed lives in your own community. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with ordinary people choosing to do the right thing when it matters most.